Welcome to Just Fearless Women. Today we are here with JJ Strait. She is the National Campaigns Director for Reproductive Freedom at the ACLU. And we're going to have a dynamic discussion on reproductive freedom, where each campaign stands, where the ACLU stands, and get into more of what it would take to regain some of those rights that we've lost. So this will be an interesting discussion, a Q&A, and we'll also upload this to YouTube and our social media platforms so that people can have the facts. Because one thing we love about the ACLU is that they are very big on giving factual information in a non-biased way, non-partisan way. JJ, as her current role, as I said, she's the National Campaigns Director, strategist for the Reproductive Freedom at the ACLU. She's worked with the ACLU's team and 54 state affiliates to fight for reproductive rights and access to abortion at the federal and local level. So previous to ACLU, JJ was a program officer at the Gill Foundation, which is responsible for identifying and developing grant-making strategies to help advance non-discrimination protections for the LGBTQ people and community, which is really cool. So we know that we love all people, and we love that. And she has a long history of work and policy work for various organizations, very rooted in protecting our rights and making sure that we know what our rights are and that we can how to fight for them, and we're just being that advocate for all communities and all backgrounds. And so we love to have you here. JJ, thank you so much for taking the time to come on with me.
Yeah, thank you so much for the conversation. This is a really important time, and would love to make sure we're spreading the word about the great work. So
Absolutely. So just to get right off the top, we've seen, obviously we're inundated with social media. Everybody's take. We know what happened. Roe v. Wade got overturned. We know at the base that's what happened 2 years ago. But knowing that we basically have two campaigns now, in your summary, where does each campaign stand on the issue of reproductive rights for women?
excellent question, and not to promote or overly promote the ACLU, but we actually wrote a series of memos really delineating where each candidate stands and what our expectations are of each candidate if they are to get elected. And you all can always look those up on aclu.org. I think it's /memos. So we wrote one on reproductive freedom, and really for former President Trump, who's running, really highlighted the impact that Project 2025, which I assume that some of your folks may have heard of, others may not have. This is a blueprint, it's about 900 pages long, that folks who surround Trump, experts in policy and politics, really decided that there was not enough done in his first term, and they weren't going to let that happen in the second term. And so they laid out a bunch of policy recommendations and administrative actions that the president could take once he was elected, with the full weight of, the movement on the right really thinking through how to attack a bunch of different freedoms. But in terms of reproductive freedom, this outlines really what Trump could do. So let's put aside the fact that Trump and his allies have talked about a national ban, and we hear him backing away from that today, or not even backing away from it. He just won't answer the question, right? But we know what they wrote down. And as Maya Angelou liked to say, like, when somebody tells you who they are, believe them. And so here's what I know. So President Trump, and through this Project 2025, and whoever is appointed in his Department of Justice, could literally enact something called the Comstock Act, which is an act from 1873, not 1973, y'all, 1873, which would effectively ban abortion nationwide with the stroke of a pen. He would not have to go through Congress necessarily to do that. And so we really highlighted, not only that President Trump made true to his promise of putting new Supreme Court justices in place who would overturn Roe, which is what we saw, which has thrown us into a national health crisis. But certainly what we would anticipate is that him and his surrounding cabinet, right, and the folks that he plans to hire would pursue something along these lines for abortion and potentially, other things that could really impact our reproductive health. The president has a lot of influence over things like funding, and we've seen in these plans, looking at defunding certain parts of departments, including how, contraception still going after the Affordable Care Act, things like that. So we really highlighted for reproductive freedom, the concern is that, there are things that the president could potentially do, again, if he's elected, that could really throw all 50 states in this country into a similar amount of healthcare jeopardy as we see certainly today in too many states across this nation. So the flip side is we wrote one for President Biden, who then, of course, stepped aside and so adjusted it to Vice President Harris. And what we will say on that is we also asked, in this memo, lay out what we want to see from a President Harris administration. Of course, the difference in the candidates is that President Harris has continually, through being vice president and now today as a candidate, committed to signing a federal law to restore abortion access in the United States of America, and is encouraging people to have that come across her desk. And what I mean by that is making sure that, if we win both the Congress, Senate, and the presidency, she would ask for a bill to be sent to her desk to sign to restore the right to abortion in this country. And so here's what I'll say. Candidates say things on the trail, and then our job is to make sure that they do that. So that's what we, really outlined in that memo. And that's what I do all day at the ACLU, is think about how we, catalyze this incredible movement that we have right now and our supporters across the United States to make sure that these politicians, as I like to say, cash this check that they're writing on the campaign trail, because as I alluded to, we are in a full-blown national healthcare crisis around these abortion bans. The intended consequences of these abortion bans are seeing us see, really dire circumstances for maternal health, for access to reproductive health, for doctors, for access to OBGYNs. There's so many things that this is actually affecting for our everyday lives and families.
Gotcha. That's a great point. I want to double back on something you mentioned. Can you elaborate more on the Comstock Act? 'Cause we've heard about it being used not only for birth control, for the abortion drug. Like, what can you just give us in a summary, if you will? I'm not sure it's probably more detailed than this, but what is it, and why is it so? Why are that particular party so heavy set on using it to take away women's rights? What is it?
Yeah, excellent question, because why would any of us be looking back to a law that was passed in 1873, and frankly, looking at misusing it for today? So what it is it's a law that was passed in 1873 by a gentleman named Anthony Comstock, who was a legislator out of New York, who it's actually an anti-obscenity law. So, I think, but Anthony Comstock had a very particular point of view, and also in that measure was very clear that for him, obscenity included materials, as you just mentioned, including information about birth control, including information and devices that could be used in abortion. So in terms of birth control, I will say there's been clear clarification because on its use for legal, which is how it's been, why it hasn't been used for abortion. But they intend to, and that's why, it's been clarified for birth control. And I'll just say Anthony Comstock in particular went after folks like the founder of Planned Parenthood and, to jail them for spreading information about birth control. So, the truth is that they'd be over-interpreting this law toward their end, using it in a way that the Department of Justice has, clearly stated it is not intended to be used today, particularly because abortion has been legal in this country across states for 50 years, and obviously almost 50 years, and obviously even with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, it's still legal in many states, including the state I sit in tonight, and the state I believe you're sitting in tonight in California. I'm in Colorado. So for them to go as far as using this law, it really shows that a couple things, in my opinion. They are desperate to continue to force their opinions upon us in a
Mhm.
democracy where they can't win at the ballot box. I say all the time that what I know is that a democracy that where the leadership is this out of balance with their constituents, it cannot go on for long. And we
Yeah.
have been winning decisively at the ballot box. We have won every ballot measure. We've seen candidates, when they are clear on their positions on abortion, the pro reproductive freedom, the folks that are fighting for abortion as healthcare win.
Yeah.
And so these folks are constantly looking for ways that they can bypass the Congress, they can
Mhm.
bypass the courts, they can bypass us, the
Yeah.
people, in this democracy, to impose their very unpopular will on us. And I think that that's why we're really trying to continue in conversations like tonight, getting the word out as much as possible so that people really understand the stakes, because we know that abortion, 7 in 10 Americans across the United States think that there should be legal abortion in this country.
Mhm.
And again, that's an overwhelming, that's way past a majority position.
Yes.
And so we intend to continue to fight forward for this very important, access to basic health care. That's what abortion is. It's health care that all of us deserve to make decisions about without the government interfering.
Got you. So one question, and I know that you mentioned you're not a lawyer, but you've been obviously giving me the tools and
I'm not,
resources.
but some of my good friends at work are lawyers. So
One thing that I'd be curious to know is, maybe, I mean, if you can't answer this, that's fine, but why do we still even have laws from 1873, depending, seeing how far we've evolved, and what would it take to get the Complex Act repealed? And I guess the next step is getting a version of Roe v. Wade codified so
yeah,
that it's not an ongoing battle every election season.
yeah. These are excellent questions. And I think the truth is that there's lots of old laws on the books that, through a normal practice of how, lawmaking works, particularly when you have something that has been, interpreted by the Supreme Court as Roe v. Wade was, and then it really made sure that states could pursue legal abortion and, put it as a right in this country. I don't want to, saying it overrode Comstock is sort of uh, maybe the wrong verbiage, but basically, it put into place a new legal scheme that made sure that we had that access. And
Yes.
so, again, like one of our attorneys called it almost like a zombie law, or like something that they're trying to revive in order to impose again that unpopular will of a minority of folks who have that point of view upon the rest of us. You're asking the exact right question, which is there is a bill that would make sure that Comstock is not misused. It's something that right now we do not have the right majorities in the House to pass, but it's something that we do need to look at. Like, okay, well then we need to make sure repeal is kind of the wrong word, but that we're really looking at this the core tenets of how you're looking at misusing this law, and make sure that we are clear on our legislative intent that should not happen. So passing a bill federally that would basically say that, and that's the thing that we need to do, right? Like in terms of I don't want to say restoring Roe, because that's not exactly what we're fighting for, but restoring the right to have access to abortion. We want to use Roe as the floor of what our demands are in this country, because we know that it was never adequate. And certainly it was able to be peeled apart pretty quickly in the states, and lots of limitations were put upon it that restricted access. And we want to make sure, as we hear, I talk to folks all day long in my work who are from all over this country. We have 54 affiliates. We have an affiliate in every state of the country that works right there in their backyards. And we know that people are telling us clearly, however they feel personally about this issue, and this is a complex issue with a range of opinions,
Yes.
they do not think that they should be checking with their politician or checking on Twitter to see what the state of abortion access is in their own state. And we know that In addition to that, we have seen, as I said, catastrophic, again, I call them intended, because I
Yeah.
don't think they're intended consequences of what an abortion ban does, which really restricts a whole host of other reproductive health care
Yeah.
that folks, need to access every day to just live their day-to-day lives.
Can you touch on that? Like, so I'm going to come back to the, what that what the law could look like. As you said, the Roe v. Wade is just the floor of it. But I want to touch on, before we circle back to that, I'd like to touch on, can you mention what are some of the other consequences that people are not thinking about? We keep hearing abortion, 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 but it's bigger than that. Like even for Alabama, IVF, there were clinics that were like, we're not going to do it because we don't want the legal or civil or criminal liability. So therefore it hurts families trying to have kids who cannot access it because clinics are like, we're out, we're done. Like,
That's right.
so what are some other, in addition, beyond abortion, what are some other intended consequences of what's taking place right now?
Yeah, I mean, Alabama is a good thing to spotlight because what folks didn't understand, and why should you? Not all of us is following all of this every single day, is that
Mhm.
what happened in Alabama was a law was passed years ago by the Alabama legislature called the Personhood Law, which basically gave, a fetus full rights. I think at the point of conception is how they wrote it. That is the standard that the opposition wants to see across this country. I live here in Colorado. We have fought personhood being put into our state constitution on the ballot and won multiple times. This is something that they are pursuing in order to basically restrict a lot of reproductive health care, including birth control. The interpretation for folks on that, our opposition, is that certain forms of birth control, like IUDs, which are a hugely popular and very helpful form of birth control for folks to have as a choice in
Yes.
how they're choosing their healthcare. They have interpreted that those things are incorrectly, by the way, and against the medical establishment, that those things should not be allowed because of these, sort of notion that that you're a
Yeah.
full person with full rights, the same that you and I have,
Mhm.
at the point of conception. And so we know, and listen, I want to say that sometimes, even as I sit here talking to you, that
Mhm.
sounds very outlandish. That sounds like, who could believe that? But
Right.
again, they write this down. They're not shy about their, position on this. This is something that they have pursued in state after state. So what happened in Alabama post the Dobbs decision was that people went to court, um, and the Alabama Supreme Court interpreted that law to include those, uh, the folks, that had pursued IVF. Um, they interpreted that personhood would create liability, and you're right, and that makes the doctors and the folks who work in that industry, it ties their hands because in many of these instances, there's criminal liability for the doctor. This is not, a parking ticket, right? This is them losing their license, going to jail, going to prison for years as a consequence of some of these laws.
Okay. So that said, can you tell me which states have any abortion or reproductive care or rights on the ballot for November? And the second part would be, we understand what the floor is, but what do you suggest, or what does ACLU suggest should go into having something codified as our Constitution?
Yeah. So we're going to see, oh my gosh, I just saw this today because every day there's like new news on, who's qualified and not, but I believe we're going to see, is it 8 ballot measures? Don't quote me on that, but I'll name the ones that I know of for sure that are on the ballot. So the ACLU is working across a handful of states, including Nevada, Arizona, Montana, Missouri, Nebraska, New York, and Florida. Uh, yeah, on measures that include either, restoring abortion access, like in places like Missouri, Oh, and here in Colorado, how could I forget my own state? For expanding access. So in Colorado, they're looking at a measure that would make sure that we're overturning some bad measures that happened that made it so that you couldn't use insurance for abortion here, and that state workers should be able to, choose, and others should be able to choose through their insurance products, what their healthcare is. So, so many states are pursuing, these measures, and a couple that we are less involved in, but really for restriction reasons. Maryland also is going to have a ballot measure. I believe South Dakota is still in litigation, but they are pursuing a ballot measure. And when I mentioned Nebraska, I do want to note for your audience that Nebraska is going to now have competing measures. So it's going to be a pretty uphill battle because, again, the other side is trying to use trickery and different things to basically, again, they know that we win, and so they're looking at tactics that confuse voters, unfortunately. Similarly, we have a great ballot measure in Florida, but DeSantis has put really confusing language inside the measure. And we know voters are smart, and we're going to push through to make sure we're educating folks about the stakes. And of course, Florida is one of those states that under DeSantis has a 6-week abortion ban.
Yes.
So
Great.
before many folks know they're even pregnant, they won't be able to have access to that. So on your second question, the ACLU has fought, and some of the ballot measures that we've put on are really to look at what is the most expansive access that we can possibly get at the moment that we're in, right? Like really making sure that we look at, after Roe v. Wade was passed, and as it wound through different variations of courts across this land and different state restrictions, we really saw a bunch of arduous restrictions put on access to abortion, waiting periods, different things that misinformation that was demanded by the state, restrictions on, like I just said, here in Colorado, a huge one is folks not being able to use public funds to access abortion. And so our intention is to use this moment along with our partners to push for the most expansive access we possibly can get federally, really demanding that we meet the moment that we're in to make sure that no matter where you live, no matter your zip code, no matter your income, no matter your religion, no matter, what, that you have access to abortion. And we will fight for that every day until we win it. We may not win that, just to be clear, in one bill. I've been around politics a long time, and as I'm sure you have, but that's what our demand needs to be. And that's what we all need to demand from our elected officials, that this is healthcare and that we can make those decisions ourselves. We can decide for our families what is best for us. And that's really what access to abortion, access to birth control, access to IVF, access to have our own bodily autonomy to be able to decide for ourselves and our families when we have children, whether or not we have children, how many children we have. Those are decisions that, frankly, I don't want to call up JD Vance to talk through.
For real.
I'm somebody who doesn't have children, and that is okay. I'm an amazing aunt, an amazing friend. I'm an amazing member of my community and society. I am not less valuable because of that decision. And I don't think somebody should be differently valued if they have 10 children. We all should decide what is best for our own lives. And that is what we will fight for.
Can you tell me or give me maybe a summary of what that looks like? Have you all mapped out what that potential bill could look like? Can you give some insight to that?
A little bit. I'm not on the policy side, so I want to be careful here. But yeah, we've been working across a coalition of folks to really look at a constellation, of bills that we've seen, and how to really pursue those collectively to make this demand. I don't know what the final bill will end up looking like, to be quite honest with you, at this point, because I think there's lots of things that are different since Dobbs that we need to make sure, for a couple reasons, right? Not not just for the political will reason, like we have a different political wind behind us than we had before Dobbs, but also because the way Dobbs was written, we need to be very conscientious about how we're writing this bill to make sure that it does what we want it to do. So for both of those reasons, what I think that is most important is to make sure that in conversations like you and I are having today, the people really understand the stakes of the people in charge of, all up and down the ballot. You mentioned at the top of that of our conversation, the ACLU is dedicated to showing, we do not make endorsements for candidates. We do not get involved in partisan politics in that way. But what we do is differentiate where the candidates stand and try to get out that information so that people are making the most informed choice they can. And then we encourage them to go to that ballot box and really and vote. And the more that we see that and can get folks who are, we are a civil liberties organization who are pro civil liberties, who believe that all of us should have constitutional protections, that we shouldn't have a court rolling back our constitutional protections for one section of America while the other section of America enjoys, full constitutional protections. That's not the country that we want to live in, and that's what we'll be fighting for.
Do you think it should be a bill or a constitutional amendment? And the reason why I ask, because I think about what happened in France earlier this year, where they had it enshrined into the Constitution. So it's there no matter what from this point forward, short of some sort of drastic change and, complete, which I don't see, but because France will fight for sure. That's one thing they will do.
Yeah.
They will fight.
Yes, they will.
Yes, seeing what they accomplished, me personally, and this is just, again, my personal opinion, I'd love to see it as a constitutional amendment, not just a bill that could potentially be repealed or misinterpreted or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I also want to say that what I do in my day-to-day work is look at the short-term and long-term. So if we win a trifecta of pro-civil liberties, folks in the House, Senate, and in the presidency this year, that's an opportunity that we cannot let go by to do this immediate protection. And then ultimately, I do think we need to think about the longer term. It is very hard to change the Constitution at the national level in this country, but it's doable. And I think it's something that we need to continue to think through, as we have with these ballot measures in states, where we've also said, hey, wait a minute, we're in a new world. We're in a new world order after Dobbs. So we need to pursue different levels of protection through the means that we have immediately. And that's why we have seen, all these states that can put on citizen-initiated ballot measures really pursue that. So listen, I think that what I say about this fight is that this is, to me, in my time on Earth, which, is not short or long, it's medium at this point, that abortion and politics around our bodily autonomy, I think this is a forever kind of fight. I think that we're always going to have to be fighting for progress.
Yes.
And I think it's a global fight. So even places that make a lot of progress, we see, a lot of backlash too. And across, I think about conversations I've been in with with folks across the world in different countries who have fought this battle over and over for years. And so, yeah, I think that we should continue to entertain, in fact, in the coalition work we're doing right now, we're really thinking about what's a 10-year plan look like? How are we working at the state, local, and federal level all the time so that we're really making sure that we don't leave any stone unturned, which is certainly what we've seen our opposition do. And we need to continue to match that fight, right? Because we are the majority and we're in a democracy and we need to demand that. But getting a constitutional amendment passed is not impossible, but it's very, very hard. And I think we need to kind of sit down and think through, what would that look like? How many years would it take us to do that? And what do we do in the meantime to build toward it, right? I think you're asking the exact right question. We cannot let's say we pass a really good bill we still have the same Supreme Court we had that overturned Dobbs. So we have to constantly think about what is the next strategy that ensures that people have access to this critical healthcare.
That would actually lead to my next question. I'm about to go to SCOTUS.
Oh, my favorite group of folks.
Exactly. So like in a recent interview that Ketanji Brown Jackson did on The View this week, wrote in her book, Joy Behar asked her, do you realize that the SCOTUS has a very low approval rating by most Americans because of what they did with Roe v. Wade and other laws after that, obviously, other scandals that have happened with the presidential immunity and so forth. She's asking her, like, what's your take on it? Because she just wrote the dissent for presidential immunity and whatnot. Right. And of course, Justice Jackson kept it very demure, very political. He explained her dissent. But my question would be is, knowing, as you mentioned, the SCOTUS that we have now, let's just say we passed a bill. We just hypothetically, we have a blue tsunami. And VP Harris is elected president. She has full filibuster-proof Senate, full House, everything, all the right things she needs. What's to stop those from the Heritage Foundation from suing if that bill gets passed and it goes all the way up to SCOTUS? My understanding, Congress makes the law. So if the law passes, can SCOTUS intervene, or can they, because I personally feel like, probably let you answer me these 2 points of SCOTUS. I feel one SCOTUS, the 3 justices that Trump appointed lied under oath, and they said Roe v. Wade was settled law. So it gives me pause on trusting their ability to really interpret the law appropriately. But then I also think they were the same ones who made sure Trump didn't get elected or didn't try to steal the election in 2020. So if they held when they could have easily just given him what people might assume that happened with Gore and Bush back when. So my question goes to, we pass a bill and we get it done. Can we, where's the trust that SCOTUS won't have another scandal on our hands?
Yeah, it's low that they won't still try to go back and intervene. However, I do think that, listen, these folks are not supposed to be politic in how they do their job, but this is the most, maybe not the most political SCOTUS ever. I don't know, I haven't lived through all of it. There's definitely been some really bad periods of the Supreme Court, but this, for us in our lifetime, is the most political Supreme Court I think we've seen. And they are not shy to, use this court to reshape the country in the image that they have of it, as opposed to, soberly doing what they're supposed to do, which is interpreting the law. In my opinion, and I'm not a lawyer, but a lot of the lawyers that I work with also share some real concerns about how they, and the lower courts, the Fifth Circuit, and Judge Kaczmarek, who we had the mifepristone case in front of, he basically made his opinion out of the Right to Life handbook. It was outrageous. It had nothing to do with the law and nothing to do with science, which is what the case was supposed to be. And so, yeah, that's a real concern. And it's why we also have to pay attention to who's president, especially in this next term. And again, make a really informed decision, knowing that this person could pick more justices. A couple of those justices are getting up there in age and, have complicated health. And so we don't want to see this court continue to be tilted in a political way. And, we know that President Trump took the recommendations from the Federalist Society and the, Heritage Foundation. That's where he got his list. He made no bones about, promising that he was going to put people on who did this, regardless of the law. And so, I don't want to say that things are hopeless, though. I think that what we do have, because you have that political court, is an opportunity. And we saw it in the cases last year on mifepristone and emergency healthcare, that the court did not do what we necessarily expected them to. Now, they didn't interpret things in our favor. They kind of kicked it down the road. But I don't think they would have kicked it down the road had they not seen all of those elections and all of us in the street and thousands of us in front of the Supreme Court and signing petitions and, you know, getting op-eds out there and doing all these things to really demonstrate, like, whoa, you all went too far.
Right.
And I think particularly Alito's opinion. I mean, it is, you know, the shorthand for me is like, so the Constitution only applies to people who look like him, and you know, come on, that's not, no, we're not going to stand for that. So I think that while I don't know what the Supreme Court will do in any certain case, I could never predict it. What I do know is that what we need to do is continue to fight forward and really demonstrate that our expectation of our Supreme Court in the United States of America is that they do their job, which is to interpret the law. It is not to be this activist court that we have seen. And, you know, how do we continue to fight in various ways to make that really known? And, you know, with folks like Judge Jackson and others, you know, those dissents are important. The ACLU was built on, you know, fighting for making sure that the whole canon of the law represented, you know, civil rights. And so those dissents are also really critical, even though it's hard when we lose at the Supreme Court. Nothing's ever lost permanently, and you know, we know that. And so, you know, I'll say this every day when I'm out there talking to our supporters or our different allied organizations. I'm just bowled over by how folks talk about this differently, how they've stepped up, and you know, how they've shown up. And I think it makes a real difference, even on a tricky Supreme Court.
Absolutely. So what I'd like to do, just to kind of wrap it up, the conversation up, can we go back just briefly and just point out where both sides end? People were maybe dropped in at the middle, or people don't always listen to the whole thing. So to end it up, where do both sides stand, and what's the ACLU's, you know, focus on if for either side getting elected? You know, what's their plan?
So again, just we do not endorse candidates at the federal or state or local level, and we are a nonpartisan organization as part of course, our tax status. But we have written memos about what our, you know, what we have seen from the candidates, and also, you know, what we expect and what we want to fight for, regardless of who is elected. And so right now, we know that Vice President Harris has multiple times on the record, probably again today, into a microphone, committed to the American people as part of her campaign, and certainly also as her actions as vice president, that she wants to right size what happened in the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And if we see a trifecta, she would sign a national bill to restore access to abortion in this country across all 50 states. And we would hold her to that campaign promise, because again, it will be a close election. It'll be close in all chambers. And even if we win all three, we're going to have work to do, everybody. We're going to have to make calls. We're going to have to call our friends. We're going to have to march. We're going to have to do a lot of things. And we will. Our biggest fear, so even as I came into this conversation with you, Trump is refusing to answer questions on abortion now. And I think, you know, people think that's an indication of where he stands. I do not think it's an indication of where he stands.
Me neither.
For reasons. He, you know, is just trying, you know, he knows that this is a very unpopular position. And so he does not want to take a position on something unpopular. And
even when he lies and says everybody wanted it, but okay.
I know. I always find that so wild. Yes, no one wanted this, or, you know, a few people wanted it, but certainly not a majority of people. Or like when he says legal scholars, I'm like, who are you talking to? Anyway, Donald Trump and his support network of folks who are, you know, probably likely to be in his cabinet, have written a document called Project 2025, which really commits to what we expect to see in a Trump presidency, and what we want to make clear, you know, that they wrote down, that they intend to push through if he is elected. And that would include enacting a national abortion ban through an old law from 1873 without Congress. I think that's what people, today he was asked, would you sign a national bill? And he wouldn't answer it. But like,
Yeah.
let's put that aside, because I don't know that they'll win a trifecta that direction either. And if they do,
Yes.
we have even more work to do. But what the concern is that he is looking at some tactics, and these people who surround him and are his closest advisors, his attorney, one of his personal attorneys, they wrote down that they would revive this because it wouldn't need Congress, because he could just do it through administrative action and through the Department of Justice. So that's why I hope that people either heard the top of this or the bottom of this. And you can always find more information on our website at the ACLU. We wrote whole memos on this.
Mm-hmm.
And just so you know, not just this issue, we wrote for both sides: LGBTQ, immigration, systemic equality. We wrote these memos to really put out there and educate about where both sides stood. It didn't matter if they had a D or an R.
Yeah.
That's not where we come from at the ACLU. As you said when you introduced me, we want to deal in the pure facts that we see on the ground, so that you go into that ballot box and you really know, like, okay, this is where this person stands on these really critical, important issues, and makes decisions on them, right? Like, has the
Yeah.
power to make decisions on them. So
I also want to mention, just for people, I know most people have not read Project 2025 because it's 900 pages. But even beyond a national ban, there would be like abortion surveillance, having police being able to have access to your medical records. Like,
yes.
it goes so much deeper than that. And I know, and I need to start doing videos about that as well, to really zero in on, like, people don't realize the nuances, how well thought out this plan is. And as and it's not to get political, but just to make a point of what Tim Walz said: when somebody writes a playbook, you can be sure they're going to use it. They didn't write this just because.
As I quoted, my favorite quote is Maya Angelou: when someone tells you who they are, believe them.
Believe them.
If they write it down, that's even more, like, this is not, this is not something that they're even trying to hide. They're being very clear, like, this is our intention. And so I think that we need to know that when we go in and make that decision, and really think through, to me, it's not only that it can be enacted, it's how quickly that could happen, because it wouldn't take Congress, right? That could happen on like day one. And so I think that all of us need to be really aware. And as you said, the other parts of that plan are chilling. It is a lot of like health reporting that is actually, health care tracking. He intends to put like an abortion or an anti-abortion, I guess, in his speak, person that's almost at like a cabinet level, not quite a cabinet level, but somebody who would be sort of reporting to him on from that kind of point of view. I mean, those are things that we really take seriously.
Exactly. So basically, do your research and look at the memos the ACLU has on our website, where they lay out, both sides. So, I mean, obviously, we know people are at their core. They've already most have picked their side. They're still undecided and swing voters, which is why I do these interviews, these chats now, because I wasn't doing this. I only started doing this like maybe 2 weeks ago, because I know how important it is, and I know how information is being spread. So I get facts, and like, I want to be able to upload it and share it everywhere, so people can know what the truth is and make informed decisions and know what's at stake.
I think that's the most important thing all of us can be doing. So no matter what part of this folks listen to or whatever, it's also really, how do you then go have this conversation? I always say, pick up your phone. Who are your favorites? Go have conversations with those folks that trust you, because that's where we make progress. And that's sometimes where the undecideds are. Even in my own family, some of them might avoid me a little bit because they definitely know where I stand. They also come to me with questions, and I really try to answer them and make sure to point them to, credible sources of information, which is hard to find in this day and age. And it can be, the internet, serves us up misinformation more than true information, unfortunately. And so, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, because I think these are the conversations, these chats, what we do in our living rooms, what we do on, with our favorites in our phone, as I like to say, or, go to your block party and, and have a conversation. And we have lots of resources for that too, like how to talk about this, because it's a personal issue. We should be talking about it in the realm of politics, but here we are. And so, how can we really make sure that people know the stakes of this election up and down the ballot? We have a lot of information on there too about how each office affects abortion. People do not realize their state Supreme Courts are up for election. Their local, governors and legislators are up for election. And it's important. Those folks make decisions in your states that now are the difference between access and no access. I mean, that's just what's happening. So we also have that on our website. Again, nonpartisan, it just describes what each office, what the power they hold in that office. So I encourage folks to use us as a resource for sure.
Thank you so much, JJ, for your time, for the information. Cannot wait to share this everywhere. And
An absolute delight to be with you. Thank you so much.
You're going to have me reaching out to other ACLU members about other topics in Project 2025, because I think to get
we
both
have a lot of information on it because we did read, not me completely. I read my sections, but and that's why we looked at, I said, a lot of issues that people may be interested in knowing more information on, and nobody has time to read that whole thing. So please, folks who know and trust the ACLU, that we really work to put out that black and white information that you can have confidence in.
And if people want to make a donation to the ACLU, where would they go?
If you go to our website, aclu.org, I'm sure there's a really prominent donate button. I should have been more eloquent about that. My development team will not love that, but please, look for that donate button, and small amounts add up, as well, or sign up for more information. If you can't give money, that's okay too. Use us and to sign up for different. We have different places that you can sign up to be on our list to get information about our cases, about the work we're doing, about your local ACLU. No matter where you are, you have a local ACLU that's fighting for you on the state level as well. So please, go to aclu.org and look us up.
Awesome. Thank you, JJ, again. This has been an amazing conversation for me just to have insight. So I thank you letting us share it, and fingers crossed, we're hoping for the best.
Absolutely. We want to see progress continue in this country for all people. So
awesome. Let me stop. Have a great one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.